This reading is titled Progress for Women. It says up here, explore these questions. How did women work for suffrage in the Progressive Era? What new opportunities did women earn? How did the temperance movement gain strength? You should define the term suffragist and also temperance movement. And over here are some key terms and important people. Carrie Chapman Catt, Alice Paul, the 19th Amendment, Florence Kelley, Frances Willard, Carrie Nation, and finally the 18th Amendment. Down here it says setting the scene. Susan B. Anthony had broken the law. Her crime was voting. Along with 15 other women, Anthony registered to vote in her hometown of Rochester, New York, in 1872. When she cast her ballot, she was arrested. At her trial, the judge directed that Anthony be found guilty. The judge then asked if she had anything to say. Anthony responded defiantly. Yes, Your Honor, I have many things to say. For in your ordered verdict of guilty, you have trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights are all alike ignored. Robbed of the fundamental privilege of citizenship, I am degraded from the status of a citizen to that of a subject, and not only myself individually, but all of my sex are doomed to political subjection. Anthony refused to quiet down or to ask for mercy. The judge then ordered her to pay a fine of $100. May it please your honor, Anthony replied, I shall never pay $1 of your unjust penalty. Anthony never did pay the fine. Her courageous stand won her many new followers. During the Progressive Era, women continued their long battle to win the right to vote. They also worked for many other reforms. Women spoke out against trusts, supported pure food laws, and called for an end to child labor. They also led a renewed effort to ban the sale of alcohol. This section says working for the vote. The struggle to grant women the vote, or suffrage, went back many years. As you read in Chapter 15, the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 was the start of an organized women's rights movement in the United States. Delegates at the convention called for many reforms, including women's suffrage. After the Civil War, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony led a renewed drive to win the vote. In 1869, they formed the National Woman Suffrage Association. This group worked to amend the Constitution to give women the vote. Stanton and Anthony opposed the 15th Amendment because it gave the vote to African American men, but not to women. The next section says women vote in the West. Few politicians favored women's suffrage. Still, in the late 1800s, women gained the right to vote in 4 western states: Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. Pioneer women had worked alongside men. By 1906, let me say that again. Pioneer women had worked alongside men to build farms and cities of the West. By giving women the vote, these states recognized women's contributions. When Wyoming applied for statehood in 1890, many members of Congress wanted the state to change its voting law. During the debate, Wyoming lawmakers wired Congress. We may stay out of the Union for 100 years, but we will come in with our women. Wyoming barely won admission. The next section says Suffragists. In the early 1900s, the women's suffrage movement gained strength. More than 5 million women were earning wages outside the home. Although women were paid less than men, wages gave women a sense of power. Many demanded a say in making the laws that governed them. By 1906, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony had died. A new generation of leaders took up their cause. Carrie Chapman's Cat spoke powerfully in favor of suffrage. Cat had worked as a school principal and a reporter. Later, she became head of the National American Woman Suffrage Association. Cat was an inspired speaker and a brilliant organizer. She devised a detailed battle plan for fighting the war for suffrage, state by state. Around the country, suffragists, or people who campaigned for women's right to vote, followed her strategy. Slowly, the efforts of Cat and other suffragists succeeded. Year by year, more states in the West and Midwest gave women the vote. For the most part, women in these states were allowed to vote only in state elections. In time, more and more women called for an amendment to the Constitution to give them a voice in national elections. The next section says amending the Constitution. Some suffragists took strong measures to achieve their goal. Alice Paul was one of them. In 1907, Paul had gone to England. There she had marched with suffragists in London. She had been jailed and gone on hunger strikes, all to help British women win the vote. Later, Paul returned home to support the cause of suffrage for American women. This section reads, Protest at the White House. Paul and other suffragists met with President Wilson soon after he took office in 1913. Wilson was not opposed to women's suffrage. He did not, however, support a constitutional amendment. Paul told the president what suffragists wanted. And it says here in quotes, "We said we're going to try and get a constitutional amendment through Congress, that we would like to have his help and needed his support very much. And then we sent him another delegation, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. Every type of women's group we could get." That's the end of the quote. In January 1917, Paul and other women stopped sending delegations and began to picket at the White House. After several months of these silent demonstrations, police began arresting the protesters. Paul received a 7-month jail sentence for obstructing the sidewalk. To protest their arrest, Paul and others went on a hunger strike. Prison officials force-fed the women in an attempt to end the strike. Upon release, Paul and the other women resumed their picketing. Victory at last. By early 1918, the tide began to turn in favor of the suffrage cause. The tireless work of Cat, Paul, and others began to pay off. President Wilson agreed to support the suffrage amendment. Finally, in 1919, Congress passed the 19th Amendment guaranteeing women the right to vote. By August 1920, 3/4 of the states had ratified the 19th Amendment. The amendment doubled the number of eligible voters in the United States. The next section reads, Women win new opportunities. For years, women struggled to open doors to jobs and education. Most states refused to grant women licenses to practice in professions such as law, medicine, or college teaching. Myra Bradwell taught herself law, just as Abraham Lincoln had done. Still, Illinois denied her a license in 1869 because she was a woman. In 1890, Illinois at last let Bradwell practice law. This section reads Higher Education. Despite obstacles, a few women managed to get the higher education needed to enter the professions. In 1877, Boston University granted the first PhD to a woman. In the next decades, women made important advances. By 1900, about 1,000 women lawyers and 7,000 women doctors were in practice. Women entered the sciences too. Mary Engel Pennington earned a degree in chemistry. She became the nation's top expert on preserving foods. And below here is a picture of suffragists on the march. And here depicts a map that says the vote for women by 1919. And I believe that is it.